Welcome to Divine Inspiration, your go-to channel for exploring the timeless stories of the Bible and discovering the profound lessons they hold for our lives today. In this video, we'll dive deep into the story of the prophet Isaiah, a man whose life and ministry shaped the course of history. If you're passionate about learning more about the spiritual truths that transcend time, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Isaiah's story is not merely a chapter in the annals of Judah's history. It is a timeless saga that reflects the very nature of God's relationship with humanity. Isaiah was born into a world marked by political division, spiritual decay, and an ever-present threat of war. Yet within the pages of his life, we discover profound lessons of faith, obedience, and the divine mission to call God's people back to righteousness. A prophet's birth in troubled times. Isaiah's life began in the land of Judah, a kingdom that was once part of the great united Israel, under Kings David and Solomon, but had since fractured into two separate nations. In the north stood Israel, while Judah remained in the south, centered around Jerusalem, the holy city. This division had weakened God's people, not only politically, but also spiritually. The kings of Israel and Judah often turned away from God's commandments, seeking alliances with foreign nations and adopting the worship of false gods. This spiritual decline weighed heavily on the heart of Isaiah, even from a young age. Growing up in Jerusalem, Isaiah would have been immersed in the history and laws of his people. The city was the religious heart of Judah, home to the temple where God's presence was said to dwell. From his youth, Isaiah would have heard stories of God's great acts of deliverance, how he freed the Israelites from Egypt, led them through the wilderness, and brought them into the promised land. But as Isaiah observed the world around him, he saw that the people of Judah were no longer living according to God's ways. Corruption, greed, and idolatry were rampant, and Isaiah could sense that this path would lead to disaster if something didn't change. It was during the reign of King Uzziah that Isaiah's life would begin to take shape as a prophet. Uzziah was a powerful and successful king who expanded Judah's territory and strengthened its defenses. He sought God during the early years of his reign, and as long as he followed God's commands, the nation prospered. However, Uzziah's success led to pride, and he eventually made the grave mistake of trying to perform priestly duties in the temple, a role that was not his to take. For this disobedience, God struck him with leprosy, and Uzziah spent the remainder of his reign isolated, a symbol of what happens when even a great king turns away from God's ways. 2 Chronicles 26:16 through 21. The vision that changed everything. The year King Uzziah died was a turning point in Isaiah's life. It was in this moment of national uncertainty and personal reflection that Isaiah experienced a vision that would transform him forever. Isaiah 6:1 begins with a dramatic account. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. This vision was not just a glimpse of divine majesty, it was an overwhelming encounter with the holiness and power of God himself. In this vision, Isaiah was not alone. Surrounding the throne of God were seraphim, angelic beings with 6 wings, who called out to one another in thunderous voices, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory." Isaiah 6:3. Their voices were so powerful that they shook the very foundations of the temple, filling the space with the weight of God's glory. For Isaiah, this was more than a spectacle. It was a moment of profound self-realization. Standing in the presence of such holiness, Isaiah became acutely aware of his own sinfulness. "Woe to me," he cried, "I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." Isaiah 6:5. Isaiah's reaction is significant. He wasn't just lamenting his personal sins, he was recognizing the collective sin of his people. Isaiah lived in a society where idolatry, injustice, and moral decay had become the norm. In the presence of God's perfect holiness, Isaiah saw how far both he and his people had strayed from the path of righteousness. He believed he was doomed, for no one can see God and live, especially not a sinner like himself. But instead of condemning Isaiah, God showed mercy. One of the seraphim flew to Isaiah with a live coal taken from the altar and touched it to his lips, saying, "See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for." Isaiah 6:7. This act of purification was a powerful symbol of God's grace. Isaiah's sins were forgiven, and he was now ready to be God's messenger to a wayward people. The call and commissioning of a prophet. With his sins atoned for, Isaiah heard the voice of the Lord asking, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" Without hesitation, Isaiah responded, "Here am I, send me." Isaiah 6:8. This was the moment when Isaiah's life took on its divine purpose. He was no longer just a concerned observer of Judah's spiritual decline. He was now a prophet, chosen and commissioned by God to deliver his message to the people. But Isaiah's mission would not be an easy one. God warned him from the outset that the people would be resistant to his message. They would hear but not understand. They would see but not perceive. Isaiah 6:9-10. Isaiah's task was not simply to deliver comforting words. He was called to confront the people with their sins and warn them of the consequences if they did not repent. It was a mission that required courage, perseverance, and an unwavering faith in God's plan. Isaiah's role as a prophet would take him into the courts of kings and into the streets of Jerusalem. He would speak to rulers like Ahaz and Hezekiah, offering them counsel in times of crisis. He would confront the rich and powerful for their oppression of the poor, and he would call the people to return to the worship of the one true God. But no matter how difficult his task became, Isaiah remained faithful to his calling. He had seen the glory of God, and he knew that his mission was part of a larger divine plan. Isaiah's message to the kings. One of the defining features of Isaiah's ministry was his involvement with the kings of Judah. His prophetic counsel was crucial during some of the most turbulent periods in the nation's history. When King Ahaz faced the threat of invasion from the northern kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Aram, modern-day Syria, Isaiah was sent to deliver a message of reassurance. God promised that the plans of these enemy nations would not succeed, but Ahaz was filled with fear and doubt. Despite God's offer of protection, Ahaz was tempted to seek help from the mighty Assyrian Empire, rather than trusting in the Lord. It was in this context that Isaiah delivered one of the most famous prophecies in the Bible, the promise of Emmanuel. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel, Isaiah 7:14. This prophecy, which Christians later saw as a foretelling of the birth of Jesus Christ, was a sign that God was with his people, even in the darkest of times. Isaiah's interactions with Ahaz were marked by the king's refusal to trust in God. Despite Isaiah's warnings, Ahaz sought alliances with foreign powers, leading Judah down a dangerous path. But Isaiah's role was not just to advise kings on matters of war and politics. He was also there to speak of the greater spiritual realities that underpin the events of the day: Hezekiah's reign and Isaiah's miracles. Isaiah's relationship with King Hezekiah, Ahaz's son, was far more fruitful. Hezekiah was a king who sought to follow God's ways, and he looked to Isaiah for guidance during some of the most challenging moments of his reign. One of the most dramatic events in Isaiah's ministry occurred when Hezekiah fell gravely ill. The prophet came to the king with a dire message: "Put your house in order, because you are going to die. You will not recover." Isaiah 38:1. Faced with this news, Hezekiah turned to God in fervent prayer, pleading for more time. God heard his prayer, and through Isaiah, he delivered a remarkable promise. "I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life." Isaiah 38 verse 5. Not only did God extend Hezekiah's life, but he also promised to deliver Judah from the threat of the Assyrian Empire. To confirm this promise, God performed an extraordinary miracle. Isaiah told Hezekiah that the shadow on the sundial would go back 10 steps, a sign that time itself was being reversed as a symbol of God's power to grant the king more years of life. Isaiah 38:7-8. This miracle was a powerful reminder that God was not only the ruler of nations, but also the Lord of time and life itself. The Assyrian Threat and Judahs' Deliverance. During Hezekiah's reign, the Assyrian Empire posed a constant threat to Judah's survival. The Assyrians had already conquered the northern kingdom of Israel and were now setting their sights on Jerusalem. The Assyrian king, Sennacherib, sent a letter to Hezekiah, mocking Judah's faith in God and boasting of Assyria's military might. In response, Hezekiah took the letter to the temple and spread it out before the Lord, praying for deliverance, Isaiah 37:14-20. Once again, God sent Isaiah with a message of hope. The prophet declared that Sennacherib's army would not enter Jerusalem, nor would an arrow be shot against the city. God himself would defend Jerusalem, and the Assyrian king would return to his own land in disgrace, Isaiah 37:33-35. That very night, the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers, forcing Sennacherib to retreat. This miraculous deliverance demonstrated the power of prayer and God's faithfulness to protect his people when they trusted in him. Isaiah's prophecies of hope and redemption. Isaiah's ministry was not just about warning the people of impending judgment. He also offered profound visions of hope and redemption. One of the most beautiful prophecies in Isaiah's book is found in chapter 11, where he speaks of a future ruler from the line of David who will bring justice and peace to the world. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord. Isaiah 11:1-2. This prophecy was a glimpse of the coming Messiah, the one who would restore God's kingdom and bring about a new era of peace. Isaiah described a world where even the natural order would be transformed. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, and a little child will lead them, in Isaiah 11:6. This vision of harmony between creatures that are normally enemies symbolized the kind of peace that the Messiah would bring, one that would extend beyond human relationships to encompass all of creation. Perhaps the most famous of Isaiah's messianic prophecies is found in Isaiah 53, where he speaks of the suffering servant who would bear the sins of the people. He was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed, in Isaiah 53 verse 5. This prophecy, written hundreds of years before the birth of Christ, describes a sacrificial death of Jesus, who would take upon himself the punishment for humanity's sins in order to bring about redemption and reconciliation with God. Isaiah's message of hope extended beyond the coming of the Messiah. He also spoke of a future when God would create new heavens and a new earth, Isaiah 65:17, a time when the old order of things would pass away and God's people would dwell in peace and joy forever. This vision of a renewed creation offered comfort and hope to the people of Judah, especially as they faced the prospect of exile and destruction. Isaiah's legacy and lasting impact. Isaiah's life and ministry spanned decades, and throughout it all, he remained faithful to the calling God had placed on his life. He spoke truth to kings, confronted injustice, and offered visions of hope that extended far beyond his own lifetime. His words have been preserved for generations, and they continue to inspire, challenge, and comfort believers today. Isaiah's story teaches us valuable lessons about faith, obedience, and perseverance. He faced opposition, rejection, and even danger, but he never wavered in his commitment to deliver God's message. His life is a testament to the power of divine calling and the importance of trusting in God's plan, even when the path is difficult. Isaiah's prophecies about the Messiah, the restoration of Israel, and the ultimate renewal of creation remind us that God's plan for the world is one of redemption and hope. Through Isaiah's words, we are invited to see beyond the struggles of the present and to trust in the future that God has promised, a future where peace, justice, and love will reign forever. Isaiah's legacy is not just that of a prophet who spoke to his own time. It is the legacy of a man whose words continue to shape the faith of millions, calling us to live lives of righteousness, justice, and unwavering trust in the God who holds all of history in his hands. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Isaiah, one of the most powerful voices in biblical history. His message of hope, redemption, and unwavering faith continues to inspire us today. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with those who need to hear it, and don't hesitate to leave your comments below. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on more content from Divine Inspiration. Together, let's grow in faith and understanding.